Hello, fellow practitioners. Welcome to the channel Heartfelt Insights Awakening to Save Sentient Beings. Today, we will listen to an experience sharing article from a Vietnamese disciple concerning the overall body of Dafa disciples. The article is titled, "The Truth Behind the Deaths of Practitioners Who Intercepted TV Signals." The video consists of 13 sections. Part 1. Purpose of writing this article. From Master's teaching, I understand that as long as one is a Dafa disciple, one must strictly comply with the laws of one's country. Whoever violates them engages in conduct that cannot be tolerated within the virtue of Dafa, and all consequences are borne by the individual himself. This is something every new practitioner knows. As I understand it, the law is a set of regulations about what is permitted, what is prohibited, and what is required. The purpose of the law is to maintain order, ensure social security, and protect the legitimate rights of citizens. Most countries make their legal systems public, guaranteeing fundamental rights such as freedom of belief, freedom of speech, and freedom to practice health exercises. When persecuted by evildoers, we can rely on the law to counter the persecution. However, at present there are still situations where some disciples misunderstand and interfere with fellow practitioners in using the law to counter the persecution. Some think that using the law amounts to fighting or opposing the government. Some others think that the law is in the hands of the persecutors, so using it is useless. Still others, who have gone astray, think that the law cannot govern cultivators, and thus deliberately violate it, in the context where the persecution arranged by the old forces is still ongoing, and new disciples are easily swayed. These mistaken notions can all the more lead to unnecessary losses. For this reason, I am writing this article, also to share ways of using the law to break through the interference of the evil, as well as to clarify the truth behind the deaths of disciples who tapped into television signals. All of this is to help fellow practitioners understand the FA correctly and apply the law in a righteous manner. Part 2. When disciples believe in Master, their words and actions must be consistent. Believing that Master protects them is the foundation for disciples to let go of life and death. If disciples believe in Master's protection, they will surely achieve consummation. A. When disciples believe in Master, their words and actions must be consistent. Listening to Master's teaching, I understood that genuine faith is reflected in the disciples' words and actions being in harmony. Thus, if we truly believe that Master's teachings are good, believe his words about vows, the final judgment, and the FA rectification events, all of which are real, then we cannot just believe with our mouths. We must practice according to Master's teachings. The more we follow what Master teaches, the more we demonstrate faith in Master and their FA. The extent to which we act on Master's words not only shows our faith, but directly reflects our reverence for Master and Dafa. No disciple would say he does not revere Master and Dafa, but many do not realize that only by truly acting according to Master's FA can one cultivate and transcend. In fact, whether it is cultivating compassion, reverence, righteous thoughts, and righteous actions, or faith in Master and the FA, all must be achieved by acting according to Master's FA. Only then can one truly transcend. Nowadays, most people no longer believe in the divine, especially in ordinary society. Some say they respect gods, yet their actions do not follow divine teachings, they only speak with words. In contrast, people in ancient times showed reverence to the divine in two ways. First, by acting according to divine teachings. Second, by expressing it from the heart. For example, they kept their vows, strictly upheld commandments, worshipped with reverence, and never dared to violate taboos. Such actions expressed both faith and sincere reverence. In the end, Master only looks at the disciple's heart. Therefore, if we do well in acting according to Master's teachings, that is true reverence for Master and Dafa. On the contrary, if a disciple cannot even act according to Master's FA, then he cannot claim to revere Master and Dafa. If we go against the FA without knowing, we are not blamed. But once we realize something is wrong yet still refuse to admit our fault, the issue becomes serious. If we err but refuse to acknowledge it, or knowingly continue doing wrong, then we are disregarding Master's teachings. Gradually, we will treat every mistake as a trivial matter. Master said, "There are indeed many people whose way of walking the path is not good, constantly committing all kinds of mistakes, even becoming accustomed to it, not considering it anything serious. Even when tribulations arrive, they do not realize where the problem lies. They have become used to it, feeling that everything is minor. Cultivation, what is meant by without omissions? There are no minor things." Teaching the FA at the West USFA Conference, 2015. B. Believing in Master's protection is the foundation for disciples to let go of life and death. From Master's teaching, I understood that if disciples can maintain righteous thoughts and righteous actions, there is no tribulation they cannot overcome, and Master can do anything for them. If a disciple can truly let go of life and death, then life and death will forever depart from him. This cannot be faked or intentionally shown, but is the natural result of cultivation within the FA. When one reaches that realm and becomes such a being, disciples also know that Dafa disciples at Consummation will carry their bodies with them, unlike the nirvana path of Shakyamuni's disciples who abandoned the body. Therefore, as long as disciples maintain righteous thoughts and righteous actions, following Master's FA, under Master's protection no demon or God would dare touch them, and they will not die. Believing in Master's protection is the foundation for righteous thoughts and righteous actions, the foundation for letting go of life and death, and for overcoming all tests. Without this faith, no matter the outward effort, one cannot meet the standard. When facing tests, we will endure pressure and suffering. If we persist in following Master's words, firmly believing in His protection, we will pass through the tests and in the end everything will turn out well. This is the foundation of cultivation, the reliance that allows us to uphold righteous thoughts and actions. Each time we pass a tribulation, we accumulate this foundation. A true cultivator, when certain he is acting according to Master's FA, will not fear any interference from demons or evil beings, because he believes in Master's protection and trusts that everything will turn out well. If one from the beginning always acts according to Master's teachings, his cultivation foundation will be solid, and he will have strong faith in Master's protection. To put it plainly, the level of one's righteous thoughts and actions directly reflects the extent of one's faith in Master's protection. True cultivators who experience far more tribulations than non-diligent ones will naturally have a much stronger faith in Master's protection. If disciples only seek Master's protection but do not follow the FA, then it is like treating Master as an umbrella for shelter. If they do not follow the FA, they are still ordinary people with no difference. And as ordinary people, they must go through birth, aging, sickness, and death. I see many non-diligent disciples sharing in vague terms. They do not know where the strength of righteous thoughts and actions comes from. Some even act against the FA, losing scriptures, signing statements with the police, yet still claim they are having righteous thoughts and actions. Others may act according to the FA but are full of fear, lack perseverance, and are not steadfast in believing in Master's protection, thus losing righteous thoughts and actions midway. The level of faith in Master's protection among non-diligent disciples is very small. Some disciples rely on worldly conditions like status, wealth, legal knowledge, positions, or talents, and feel confident when the evil interferes or when facing the police. But this is not righteous thoughts and actions. It is merely human confidence. Cultivators cannot rely on such things for strength, nor can they use them to eliminate evil interference. These things cannot stop the old forces from persecuting. From Master's teaching, I understood that when disciples are persecuted, the evil cannot shake the steadfast righteous thoughts of genuine disciples because cultivators can let go of everything in the human world. On the contrary, if one is attached to worldly things, status, wealth, law, positions, talents, then he cannot cultivate righteous thoughts and actions, and may even violate Master's FA out of fear of losing them. See disciples who believe that Master protects them will certainly cultivate to consummation. Master said, as long as you uphold righteous thoughts and righteous actions. There is no test you cannot pass, even when it is truly very dangerous and you do not know where the problem comes from. You still must not lack righteous thoughts, no matter the situation. You must not waver in your fundamental faith in Dafa. For at that time, even if you have not yet thought things through, or have not done something well, or have not passed a great tribulation, or even if you lose your human body and depart this world, you will still achieve consummation. That is because I do not acknowledge this persecution. It is only that the persecution has created such tribulations for you. So you must pay close attention. San Francisco FA Conference 2005. Master said, if, when a tribulation is before you, your first thought is truly righteous, when the evil persecution is before you, when interference is before you, if with steadfast righteous thoughts, you say just one sentence, it can cause the evil to immediately disintegrate. It can cause those who are being used by the evil to lower their heads and flee. It can cause the persecution that the evil aimed at you to vanish like smoke dispersed, and cause the interference that the evil directed at you to disappear without a trace. With this one righteous thought of true faith, whoever can firmly uphold it, whoever can walk to the very end, that person can become a great God forged in Dafa. Teaching the FA at the Western U.S. International FA Conference, 2005. Through cultivation, I have enlightened to this. Sometimes a disciple makes mistakes against the FA taught by Master without realizing it. This is precisely why some people, when facing harassment from the police, give rise to doubt and think, Master is not protecting disciples. I once experienced life and death tribulations and thus felt this deeply. In cultivation, I have made many mistakes and was persecuted by the old forces. Sometimes my faith in Master's protection was very strong, but other times it weakened. At one point, I even fell into despair and lost faith altogether. When I reached the brink of life and death, it was by raising a single thought, I have done wrong. I want to correct it. I believe Master protects me, that I escaped death. From that experience, I understood that it is absolutely impossible for a disciple who acts according to the FA. Master teaches to still be persecuted by the old forces. When tribulations come, as long as a practitioner raises a single thought of admitting one's mistakes, or firmly believes in Master's protection, the evil will disintegrate, the persecution will vanish, and the interference will disappear. That righteous thought is the truest one, and if upheld to the end, the disciple will become a great God forged in Dafa. Master said, with such a grand FA present, when you have righteous thoughts you are together with Dafa, and that is an enormous safeguard. When righteous thoughts are insufficient or not in line with the FA, you will separate from the power of the FA, and then a state of isolation without support will appear. Even when doing Dafa things, they must accord with the FA, otherwise there will be no power of the FA. Teaching the FA in Manhattan, 2006. Master said, if interference arises, you must not always think, whoever interferes with me, I need to eliminate it. No one is allowed to interfere with me. But why don't you think about why the interference came to you? How could it reach you? Do you still have an attachment? Something not yet let go? Why not look within yourself? The true cause lies within you. Only then can the evil drill into the loophole. Don't you have Master watching over you? Teaching the FA at the 2003 Midwest US FA Conference, New York City. In the Scriptures, Master does not state directly that if a disciple violates the FA, he will be interfered with by the evil. Master only said that if a disciple has loopholes, the evil will exploit them to persecute. We cultivators need to enlighten to this on our own, especially regarding faith in Master and faith in the FA. Once a disciple goes against the FA, he will separate from the power of the FA, fall into isolation, and lose protection. At that moment, the evil will drill into the loophole to persecute. This is a fundamental FA principle that every Dafa disciple in the FA rectification period must clearly understand. As for those disciples who died during the persecution by the Chinese Communist Party, or passed away under different circumstances elsewhere in the world, the reasons were due to heavy karma, lifespan having ended, or committing serious mistakes against the FA. Only then did the old forces dare to persecute to death. If we do not believe this, it means we do not believe Master's protection, and this is a fundamental issue of faith in Master and faith in the FA. Believing in Master's protection is the foundation for one's heart to reach a state free of fear, thereby truly letting go of life and death. Disciples who did the three things well but were persecuted to death, although they did not pass the life and death barrier, will still achieve consummation, because they walk the path according to the FA required by Master. This shows that consummation does not depend on the manner of one's departure, but on whether one truly cultivated according to the FA. This itself is the manifestation of disciples' faith in Master. Therefore, disciples who believe in Master's protection will certainly cultivate to consummation. We may commemorate fellow practitioners who have passed away, but if we glorify them as heroes or great ones, that is an insult to Dafa, for it inadvertently places the cultivator above the FA, instead of affirming that it is Dafa and Master who are truly great. Thus, always remember, believing in Master's protection is the key to reaching consummation. Part 3. Why Disciple Solemn? Declarations can completely eliminate the interference of the evil. Master said, there are people who, when it comes to cultivation, appear to be very diligent. They are also studying the FA. They are also doing the exercises, but they do not look within. Without looking within, think about it, everyone. Isn't that exactly an ordinary person? Do ordinary people ever look within? Do any among ordinary people look within? Whenever I run into any conflict, I must think about where I myself am wrong. Once I truly think it through clearly, then I apologize sincerely to the other person. Teaching the FA at the 2015 New York FA Conference, Master said, I have never acknowledged this persecution. I also do not acknowledge any of those things of the old forces, and furthermore will never acknowledge them. Teaching the FA at the 2013 Greater New York FA Conference, hearing Master's teaching, I understand that when conflicts arise, disciples need to examine themselves. If one finds oneself in the wrong, one must admit it and apologize. If not in the wrong, then it is enough to maintain a calm mind. The essence of looking within is to recognize shortcomings, correct them, and act in accordance with the FA. Thus, when a disciple errs but knows to admit fault, that is exactly following Master's teaching. In FA rectification, Master does not acknowledge the persecution or any arrangements of the old forces. Therefore, when disciples sincerely admit their mistakes, they can completely eliminate all interference from the evil. In cultivation, who has never made mistakes? What matters is a disciple's attitude toward Master and Dafa. If one does not dare admit faults, does not want to take responsibility, then even if one speaks of looking within, it is useless. Thus, erring but admitting mistakes is the true foundation of looking within, the foundation of a cultivator, and also the root of being a good person. There are times in cultivation when a disciple makes mistakes without realizing it. In fact, this is only the initial stage when incidents occur. When we make mistakes, Master will certainly enlighten us many times through different forms. Master gives disciples chances to correct their errors, so it is absolutely impossible for a disciple to have made mistakes yet be completely unaware of it. But when Master enlightens us, whether we use ordinary people's hearts or use the FA to deal with the error is what truly matters. This is also the difference between a genuine cultivator and one who is not truly cultivating. A genuine cultivator, once realizing he has erred, will correct himself, while one who is not truly cultivating regards every fault as trivial. Once a person realizes he has erred but still refuses to admit it, his life will be in danger, especially when it comes to major mistakes. Master said, many people are indeed not walking their path well, and keep making various kinds of mistakes, even becoming accustomed to it, and they don't regard it as significant. Even when a tribulation arrives, they still don't know where the problem lies. They have grown accustomed to it and feel it's all trivial matters. Cultivation, what is called free of omissions. There is no such thing as trivial matters. Teaching the FA at the 2015 West Coast FA Conference, Master said, "Moreover, when attachments are strong, very bad states will even appear. But when major problems appear, you must pay attention and correct them, for that is the most dangerous time." Teaching the FA at the 2003 Atlanta FA Conference, if a disciple does not look within, does not admit mistakes, gradually he will take Master's words lightly, treating all errors as minor, which will lead to knowingly doing wrong. It is just like children disregarding their parents' instructions, doing wrong but not correcting it, knowingly doing wrong anyway, that is looking down upon their parents. When disciples act against the FA, it easily damages their virtue. If left unrectified for long, one's shenshing and level will drop, especially for serious errors that undermine Dafa. Although Master has separated and preserved the well-cultivated parts of us, making it not easy to drop in level, this does not mean one cannot fall. Cultivation can lead upward, but it can also fall downward. Even gods who commit wrongdoing will drop in level, let alone cultivators. Master said, if you cannot measure yourself by Dafa in the things you do, if you cannot use righteous thoughts to consider problems, if you do not stand within the FA when facing issues, then you are just an ordinary person, with no difference whatsoever. What is a Dafa disciple? Master said, those who can play a role in undermining the FA are only people within. Whoever acts that way is not a Dafa disciple, so you must not regard them as Dafa disciples, no matter how long they have cultivated. Teaching the FA at the 2014 San Francisco FA Conference, although Master does not acknowledge the arrangements of the old forces, if a disciple commits serious errors, or harms Dafa but still refuses to admit fault, then the old forces will take the excuse of protecting Dafa to persecute him. At that time, Master faces difficulty in wanting to protect an ordinary person who is engaging in behavior that undermines Dafa. Usually, when disciples encounter tribulations such as police harassment, they endure pressure from many sides, from family, workplaces, and sometimes even interference from some deviated disciples, going out to clarify the truth, to sue the persecutors, etc., is good and shocks the evil. However, I have seen disciples become overly distracted by circumstances around them. In fact, in tribulations, the most important thing we must first do is rectify ourselves. Only after that do we carry out other efforts to resist the persecution. Even if we are weak in resisting persecution, the tribulation will still be dissolved, because we are under Master's protection. Of course, if during the process of resisting persecution, we can clarify the truth to save sentient beings, that is even better. In fact, when disciples go against the FA, the best thing is to correct themselves and make up for the losses, especially with serious matters such as writing pledges for the police, causing disturbances to the FA, damaging Dafa's image, or improper relationships between men and women, etc. An apology is only the last resort, when restitution can no longer be made. Yet in practice, many disciples' solemn declarations stop only at admitting fault, without truly correcting themselves to make up for the losses to Dafa. Even so, Master is still compassionate, helping to eliminate the interference of the evil. After all, daring to admit mistakes is already following Master's teaching, because facing one's faults is also a step in elevating one's shenshing. At present, the universe has entered the last phase of the final kalpa. Human morality is degenerating, and many things are warped. Few people, when doing wrong, dare to admit their faults and take responsibility. In reality, not everyone who comes to a practice site is truly a Dafa disciple. Many people make mistakes but refuse to admit them. The reason is that they are blocked by many attachments, such as fear of losing face, fear of being held accountable, fear of others knowing they have not cultivated well, or fear of losing reputation. But as long as they dare to admit faults, Master will help remove those attachments. If disciples err but refuse to admit it, how could Master help them increase gong? Some fellow practitioners once said, writing a solemn declaration apologizing to Master, and that alone can eliminate the interference of the evil. Then cultivation is too easy. Some also asked, is it possible that the practice sites in Vietnam being harassed by the police are all because disciples acted against Master's FA. And are the disciples in China being persecuted in the CCP suppression also all because they went against the FA? In fact, such remarks show that the foundation of their cultivation still has problems. To help fellow practitioners see this more clearly, at the end of this article our group will share a case of wrongdoing by the global body of disciples, which caused serious damage to Dafa and involved very many disciples worldwide. Note, I have read some articles written by Dafa disciples on Minghui to solemnly clarify themselves. However, in those writings, they only recounted the mistakes made during the process of being interfered with by the police, without realizing that it was precisely because they had done wrong beforehand that the evil was able to interfere. This shows that they still have not clearly understood the cause of their being interfered with by the evil. When the knot in the heart has not been untied, one's faith in Master will be impaired, and this will in turn affect the entire process of cultivation. Part 4. Law, the lowest moral standard among ordinary people. From Master's teaching, I understand that law is the lowest moral standard in human society, helping to maintain order when human morality declines. Without law, society would fall into chaos, everyone living by force, the strong oppressing the weak, disputes resolved by violence. Throughout China's 5,000-year history, every dynasty had laws. Today, in the last days, human morality has seriously degenerated. Law has become the dividing line between good people and bad people. For example, in traffic, if everyone ran red lights at will, society would be chaotic. A cultivator deliberately violating the law shows that his xinqing is even lower than that of ordinary people. Violations committed unintentionally are another matter, but deliberately breaking the law is against reason. In Vietnam, legal violations are divided into two levels: administrative, fines, and criminal, prosecution. Criminal offences mark the boundary between good and bad people. One who intentionally commits a criminal offence is a bad person. The problem does not lie in the law itself, but in some officials who, for personal gain, abuse their power to act against the law. This undermines the fairness of the law and erodes public trust. For practitioners, if one judges the entirety of law based only on these phenomena, it is not in line with the FA. What is important is to take Master's FA as the standard, not human misconduct. Some disciples who have gone astray claim that the law only governs ordinary people, and cultivators need not comply. This is a grave misunderstanding. For example, the Group 2021 Coordinating Committee in Vietnam illegally bought and sold Dafa books, set up a Buddhist Studies Association without proper registration under Vietnamese law, concealed fraudulent land dealings worth billions of dong. These are genuine violations of law that cannot be excused. A true cultivator has Master's FA in his heart. He cannot knowingly do wrong, much less deliberately break the law. If one cannot even maintain the lowest standard of law, how can one cultivate to become a god? Part 5. What if the law contradicts what Master teaches? The principles Master teaches guide us to be good people and elevate our morality beyond ordinary people. Master standards are far higher than human laws. Therefore, if local laws contradict Master's teachings, disciples must firmly follow Master, placing the FA above the law. This is the manifestation of the principle of taking the FA as teacher in actual cultivation. For example, China's one-child policy once forced abortions. Some disciples maintained righteous thoughts and refused to kill. As a result, their children were born safely, and no one gave them trouble afterward. This is evidence that righteous thoughts and righteous actions are always protected by Master. At present, some worldly laws legalize things that go against morality, such as prostitution, homosexuality, etc., but these are only exceptions. Overall, human laws still uphold basic moral values. Genuine cultivators must understand and respect the law as the minimum standard. All we do to validate the FA must be upright and lawful. Cultivate to become good people. Spread Qigong for health improvement. Clarify the truth about the persecution and forced organ harvesting. Call on people to turn toward goodness and resist evil. If a disciple violates the law, it is because they have gone astray themselves, not because validating Dafa is unlawful. Therefore, we must not use ordinary means or break the law to validate Dafa. When we both abide by the law and act according to the FA, things will turn out well. True cultivators believe that with Master's protection, no force dares to interfere. On the other hand, if one follows both the law and the FA but still does not believe in Master's protection, then there is a fundamental problem in cultivation. It will be difficult to consummate and become a god. In essence, the process of cultivation is a test of whether disciples firmly believe in Master. Master said, no matter who it is, or what kind of social force it is, if it tells you not to cultivate, and you then stop cultivating, then are you cultivating for them? Will they give you consummation? Isn't relying on them a form of superstition? In fact, that's the true ignorance. For whom do you practice cultivation? Some disciples even raise a question. Contrary to Master's teachings, what if the law prohibits us from cultivating Dafa? This is deviant enlightenment, because it places human law above the FA. As disciples, we only need to follow Master's teachings, never using ordinary thinking to make assumptions and confuse ourselves. Fellow practitioners, think about it. What nation would make a law forbidding people basic rights, such as freedom of belief and health cultivation? If such laws truly existed, what international community or enterprise would dare cooperate with such a dictatorship? Even in China's publicly available legal codes, there is no clause banning people from practicing Falun Gong. The persecution is merely the result of officials abusing their power in violation of the law. Therefore, the very question, what if the law prohibits, has no factual basis, and even less should it be something cultivators dwell on. In short, abiding by the law is the minimum standard, but following Master's FA is the higher standard, with righteous thoughts and righteous actions. Without using ordinary tricks, we walk the true path of validating Dafa. Part 6. Legal clarity. Under no circumstances should one comply with the demands of evil. Master said, under no circumstances should one follow the demands, orders, or instructions of evil. If everyone did so, circumstances would not have reached this point. The power of Dafa disciples' rightful thoughts, essentials of diligence too. Some Dafa disciples hold an ordinary person's view that, because the law is in the hands of persecutors, obeying the law is meaningless, and they do not truly believe in Master's protection. As a result, they refuse to follow the law, or even intentionally violate it, using the excuse, under no circumstances should one comply with the demands of evil. For this reason, this section clarifies the distinction between obeying the law and not complying with the demands of evil. We all know that evil in other dimensions often manipulates authorities, police, to create difficulties and persecute Dafa disciples. The demands of evil in daily life often appear as police forcing false signatures, removing materials about the FA, soliciting bribes, or taking one to the station unlawfully. But the police also represent the law. If we completely refuse to cooperate, they will claim that we are opposing law enforcement. Therefore, under no circumstances should one comply with the demands of evil does not mean always opposing the police, but refusing to follow illegal demands that contradict what Master has taught. We must clearly distinguish. We obey the law, not individual police officers. When they act according to the law, we cooperate. When they act unlawfully, we must not comply, and careful discernment is required. A practical example, I managed a dormitory for an acquaintance and frequently interacted with local police. They required me to register temporary residents, provide tenant information, prepare fire extinguishers, and install fire alarm systems, all lawful, so I complied. This is a citizen's responsibility. But if they demanded a bribe, I refused. Here are some specific cases. Case 1. Local police invited me to a fire safety training and asked me to sign a document confirming that the dormitory fully met fire safety regulations. I was only overseeing it for someone else, and the owner had not yet purchased the necessary equipment. Signing falsely would make me responsible in case of a fire. It was both unethical and illegal, so I refused and asked the owner to handle it. Case 2. Police inspected the dormitory and asked me to sign a safety confirmation, while in reality, the owner had bribed them and had not prepared anything. They did not inspect but still pressured me to sign. This was illegal, so I refused. I remained calm, offered them water, and called the owner, who did not come. Finally, the police requested me to sign that they had visited but the owner was absent. Since this was true, I agreed. What I want to emphasize is, when interacting with police, we must be rational. If they act according to the law, we cooperate. If their demands align with truthfulness, compassion, forbearance, we comply. For example, if they ask me to call the owner, I do. But if they act unlawfully, we resolutely refuse. Some police say, if you are righteous, why are you afraid to come to the station? This is evil's words. In Vietnam, when police force citizens to the station without a lawful summons, it is illegal. If we fail to discern and blindly comply, we may violate the law and create trouble ourselves. The above fire safety examples illustrate this. Master does not accept evil's arrangements to test Dafa disciples, even if we make FA mistakes and are persecuted by evil, as long as we maintain rightful thoughts and follow Master's teachings. During the trial, we negate evil's arrangements. Case 3. Once, local police came to inspect fire safety at a dormitory. They said that my promotion of Falun gong was illegal and demanded that I remove FA truth banners. I firmly refused. One officer called 2 more. All 3 aggressively demanded that I go to the station. I called upon Master and firmly maintained rightful thoughts. Eventually, all 3 left after consulting among themselves. Many miraculous events occurred under Master's protection. In summary, when police interfere, as long as disciples do not comply with illegal demands and maintain a compassionate heart, they have already negated evil's arrangements. Note: fellow practitioners should avoid being taken to the station, which is a den of evil, where evil acts without restraint. Of course, this depends on the disciple's firm rightful thoughts. However, some disciples with strong rightful thoughts voluntarily go to the station to clarify the FA to the police, which is not truly advisable. Why? First, when fellow disciples are interfered with by police, they are within evil's arrangement, in a passive position, and only by fully following Master's FA can they escape evil's scheme. Second, the most important thing when interfered with by police is to maintain rightful thoughts and not obey illegal demands from evil. Disciples who wish to clarify the FA should do so on the spot. If the police do not listen, stop. There is no need to follow unlawful orders and go to the station, creating trouble. Third, following police to the station can poison the minds of relatives and local residents, who may think someone has problems because they were taken, rather than understanding it is a lawful invitation, especially when the practice site is interfered with. This is serious and results from disciples not fully following Master's FA. Fourth, only if a disciple seriously violates the FA will the police interfere. Therefore, when interfered with, disciples must believe they have made a FA mistake. This is crucial and reflects genuine faith in Master's protection. Thus, when police interfere, the fundamental requirement is legal clarity, faith in Master's protection, firm rightful thoughts, a compassionate heart, and absolutely following Master's FA teachings. Master said, if a disciple does not act according to Master's instructions, it will certainly not be a simple matter. Evil has a set of arrangements for all Dafa disciples. If a disciple does not act according to Master's instructions, they are inevitably following evil's arrangements. Excerpt from Qingjing, Essentials of Diligence 3. Especially, evil exploits the words of relatives to prevent disciples from clarifying the FA and spreading Dafa, allowing only practice. Many disciples often overlook or underestimate this issue. The consequence is that evil uses relatives to interfere and persecute disciples more severely. While the universe is undergoing rectification and evil is persecuting Dafa on earth, disciples who have practiced for a long time but do not follow Master's teachings, who do not step forward to clarify the FA to uphold Dafa, are in fact following evil's arrangements. Part 7. If disciples within the group violate the law and sabotage Falun Dafa. How should other disciples respond? From these FA passages of Master, it is clear the work itself is not cultivation. What matters is the attitude and handling by the disciple. Acting according to the FA constitutes cultivation. Otherwise, one is just like an ordinary person, with no difference. The crime of sabotaging Falun Dafa is so severe that even 18 levels of hell cannot contain it. Only those within the disciple circle can harm. Falun Dafa. Those who truly sabotage Dafa are not disciples, and we should not treat them as fellow practitioners. This distinction is not out of hatred but to protect Falun Dafa, while maintaining compassion and hoping they awaken and return. Many disciples are unclear about the boundary between personal mistakes and acts that sabotage Falun Dafa. 3 situations must be distinguished. 1. Personal mistakes. If a disciple falls into attachments such as fame, gain, or relationships, it mainly harms themselves. 2. Sabotaging Falun Dafa. If a mistake is propagated and draws others away from the FA, it is serious. We must issue a collective warning so disciples are not led astray. 3. Legal violations. If an action breaks the law and also damages the image of Falun Dafa or poisons sentient beings, the responsibility is heavier. They face both legal consequences and need to distinguish it as a personal mistake, unrelated to Dafa. A. Collective warning is required to prevent other disciples from being influenced. If a disciple's legal violation is unrelated to Falun Dafa, ordinary law enforcement should handle it. We should not intervene. But if the action involves sabotaging Dafa or affects other disciples' cultivation, we must take the position of protecting Dafa, distinguish clearly, maintain righteous thoughts, and not be led away from the FA. If a disciple breaks the law, they should accept the legal penalty. This complies with the law, and is also practicing correctly, according to Master's teaching. Conversely, if they break the law and inadvertently harm Falun Dafa, and fellow disciples try to prevent them from facing consequences, this is deviating from the FA, protecting attachment, Qing, rather than Falun Dafa. The most important principle is to prioritize protecting Falun Dafa. To truly help fellow disciples, the first step is to guide them to correct themselves. Issue a serious rectification statement, apologize to Master, and strive to restore the losses to Falun Dafa. Then, within the scope of the law, assistance such as hiring a lawyer for mitigation may be offered, but expecting them to escape all legal responsibility is attachment, especially in criminal cases. The disciple's attitude in acknowledging mistakes and their reverence toward Master is decisive. When a disciple genuinely rectifies and restores the harm, under Master's protection, calamities will be fully resolved, and everything will turn out well. This is certain. Master does not recognize the old forces' trials imposed on disciples. It is only because disciples fail to admit mistakes that the old forces find pretext for persecution. If they do not rectify, we can no longer regard them as Falun Dafa disciples. Especially for assistants or coordinators, the responsibility is even greater. Master teaches, regarding those who truly sabotage our FA, no matter who they are, when they appear, we replace them. This is because we have no demands on the practitioners. Those who wish to learn may learn. Those who do not wish cannot be forced. But once someone learns, we have a responsibility to teach them. But this does not apply to coordinators. If they do not perform well, it will affect many others. Therefore, if we see anyone engaging in the showy, heretical, or sectarian activities, we must immediately remove them. Here, I solemnly point out to everyone, a practitioner at the Sai Chi QNG Park practice site behaved improperly for a period and still does not admit his mistakes. We do not need him to admit them. He must rectify himself, but he shows no signs of doing so, and it is said he still causes very negative influence, regardless of how he treats me on the surface or behind my back. If he affects this FA, he can no longer serve as a coordinator. Opinions on Zheng FA, discussed at the coordinators' meeting in Beijing. When an issue affects Falun Dafa, the collective must first generate strong righteous thoughts, dismantle the evil behind the scenes, protect a pure cultivation environment, and give the disciple a chance to awaken. Note, We must absolutely not cooperate in Dafa verifying work with those who sabotage Falun Dafa, as that would be tantamount to supporting their sabotage. However, we do not attack or deny any contributions they made in verifying Dafa. We only point out the actions that sabotage Falun Dafa. Not cooperating with those who sabotage Dafa does not imply hatred or exclusion. Compassion must be maintained in the heart, guiding them to awaken, hoping they return soon. We do not push disciples away because they went astray. We merely need to clearly distinguish our stance to protect the FA and maintain a pure cultivation environment for the collective of disciples. Part 8. The truth behind the deaths of practitioners who intercepted television signals. The 50-minute film, Eternal, recounts the incident in which a group of Dafa disciples in Changchun intercepted television broadcasts on March 5, 2002, in order to spread the truth about Dafa and save sentient beings. Many fellow practitioners have likely watched this film. However, one crucial detail is often overlooked. On the very night the group successfully intercepted the broadcast, all members were arrested by the police. After being persecuted in prison, only one person survived. The incident led the Chinese authorities to arrest about 5,000 practitioners connected to Changchun. In the years that followed, many other interception incidents also occurred, but almost all the practitioners involved were arrested soon after, causing great losses to the overall body of Dafa disciples in China. The retaliation from the CCP was extremely violent and brutal. Within 1 hour of the incident, officials mobilized military forces to arrest practitioners. Jiang also issued a secret order to kill without pardon. About 5,000 practitioners in Changchun were arrested. Among them, at least 8 people died. Furthermore, 15 practitioners were sentenced to terms ranging from 4 to 20 years. After being persecuted both physically and mentally, some of them died and some suffered mental collapse. Excerpt from Memoirs of a Survivor of the Changchun TV Signal Interception 19 years ago in Jilin. 2 practitioners in Chongqing Province intercepted local television broadcasts in 2001, marking the first success in exposing the persecution. 1 year later, a series of television interception incidents took place, and 93 practitioners were arrested. Following the TV signal interceptions, a total of about 129 practitioners were arrested from 2001 to 2005, 1/3 of them women. Over 85% of those arrested, about 110 practitioners, were sentenced to prison terms, ranging from 3 to 20 years, with an average of 12.5 years. Among the 129 practitioners, some died shortly after being arrested, while others either died in prison or suffered severe physical and mental damage after being released. To date, among those sentenced, 11 practitioners have died from injuries or health issues due to torture, while 10 more have also died over the years. Excerpt from Intercepting State Television in China, a historical perspective on Falun Gong. Practitioners' peaceful appeal against the persecution in China. Fellow practitioners, doesn't this seem strange? We have Master's protection. As shown in the FA teachings cited above, there is absolutely no such thing as disciples doing things according to Masters. FA and yet the old forces daring to persecute them. If the TV interception projects in China were truly carried out in accordance with the FA, then why were all the practitioners involved arrested? There are only 2 possibilities. Case 1, if we say that they, practitioners who intercepted broadcasts, were acting in accordance with the FA, yet were still arrested and persecuted to death, then isn't that essentially saying that Master did not protect disciples? Case 2, the practitioners who intercepted broadcasts committed serious mistakes against the FA, and thus the old forces dared to persecute them to death. As stated before, anyone persecuted to death by the old forces either had great karma, had reached the end of their life, or more importantly, had committed serious mistakes against the FA. If we do not believe this, then we do not believe in Master's protection. The film Eternal also clearly shows that intercepting TV signals is an act against the law. Everyone knows this, even those not familiar with legal matters. No country, whether capitalist or communist, would allow its citizens to climb electric poles, cut national TV cables, and insert unauthorized broadcasts. From this we can see that Dafa disciples must strictly abide by the laws of the countries where they reside. Those who violate the law will not have their deeds counted as virtue, and they will bear the consequences themselves. It was precisely because the TV interception projects violated the law, and more importantly, seriously went against Master's FA teachings, that the old forces exploited this loophole to arrange evil persecution, resulting in the deaths of many practitioners involved. What Master taught is not just about ordinary human legal principles, but a strict standard for disciples cultivating during the FA rectification period. Any action, even if stemming from good intentions, that is not carried out according to Master's requirements, is in fact following the arrangements of the old forces. Master taught, as a practitioner, if you don't conduct yourself according to the requirements of your Master, it is no trivial matter. The old forces have made a set of arrangements for each Dafa disciple. If a Dafa disciple does not conduct himself according to the requirements of the Master, then he is definitely conducting himself according to the arrangements of the old forces. From Clear-Headed, Essentials for Further Advancement 3, it should also be acknowledged that the original intention of the practitioners who intercepted broadcasts was to save sentient beings, arising from compassion. But compassion does not justify acting against the FA. In cultivation, the key is not enthusiasm, but whether one's actions accord with the FA. Once the method deviates from the FA, then no matter how good the motivation may be, it will be exploited by the old forces for persecution. The consequence of the television interception incidents was that thousands of disciples were arrested, sentenced to heavy terms, many persecuted to death, and countless families torn apart. Meanwhile, society was further poisoned by propaganda, deepening misunderstandings about Dafa, causing enormous damage to saving sentient beings. This was a tremendous loss to the overall body of Dafa disciples. Therefore, these incidents are a profound warning. We cannot glorify mistakes out of sympathy for sacrifices. To glorify disciples who acted wrongly is to deny Master's protection, to undermine the overall body's righteous faith in Master, and to cause serious consequences for both individuals and the whole. In fact, subsequent repeated interceptions show that the overall body of disciples did not pay enough attention to Master's teaching about strictly abiding by the laws of their countries. The purpose of this article is to alert the overall body of Dafa disciples. We must stop glorifying those who acted against Master's FA and rectify all incidents of unlawful interception, making clear why practitioners were persecuted after those actions. Only by thoroughly putting an end to this phenomenon can the overall body truly rectify itself, maintain firm righteous faith in Master and Dafa, uphold righteous thoughts and righteous actions, pass through tribulations, and not let down Master's compassionate salvation. Rectification is not only about correcting past mistakes, but also about eliminating the arrangements of the old forces, safeguarding the dignity of Dafa, preserving the overall body's righteous faith, and cherishing Master's boundless compassion. If rectification is not carried out in time, then glorifying disciples who acted wrongly will continue to be tacitly accepted, becoming a negative example for others, and causing the overall body to deviate further from the FA. Recently, there has also been a major lesson concerning violations of the law in disciples' projects. Minghui reported that both BBC and the New York Times carried stories about the Epoch Times being accused by US federal prosecutors of money laundering, and linked it to Falun Gong. The Epoch Times is also DAG Yuan. A few days later, Master issued the lecture FA teaching at the conference in Washington, D.C. in 2023, FA Tribulation, reminding disciples running media in the United States not to earn money through improper means. Master taught, the problem that has emerged in disciples media now mainly comes from the students themselves not doing well, but also involves factors behind human society in other dimensions. You feel that without money it is very hard to oppose the persecution, and you want to make some money to oppose the CCP's persecution. You think that if there are shortcomings, The US government can understand. That is only what you yourself imagine. You think that facing the organ harvesting, when people are dying every day from the persecution, if you use this money for opposing the persecution and not for other purposes, then it should be overlooked. But don't forget that Dafa. Disciples must always walk their path in a righteous way so that no problems will occur. From the lecture Fa Tribulation. When disciples act against the law, the old forces will seize it as an excuse to persecute, destroying the project, severely damaging Dafa's image, poisoning sentient beings, and undermining efforts to save them. This is a very clear lesson, right in front of us, one that everyone can see and learn from. It is not something distant or hard to recognize. Part 9. Disciples who intercepted TV signals will still reach consummation, although those tragic consequences arose from acting against the FA and being exploited by the old forces. This cannot negate the compassionate nature and the wish to save people of those disciples who intercepted TV signals. That is why, after watching the 50-minute film Eternal Story, my heart became heavy. Even though I knew those fellow practitioners had acted against the FA, I could not hold back my tears, feeling it was unfair. I thought that their cultivation environment was too harsh. They only wanted to save sentient beings, yet were persecuted to death by the old forces. Later, I read a passage of the FA from Master. It comforted my heart to some extent, while also making me more clear about the seriousness of taking the FA as teacher, and the cultivation path to becoming a divine being. Master said, thus, judging from being a Dafa disciple, today you can follow Master to do FA rectification. I think, what is awaiting you in the future? I have never explained to you specifically, but today I will tell you a little bit. It is the highest and most supreme honor that has never existed in history. Have you thought about it? No matter who persecutes Dafa, no matter who persecutes Dafa disciples, no matter how high the beings who participated are, those beings have already formed an equal relationship with you. No matter how high they are, they have already formed an equal relationship with you. Moreover, those connected are the lords of very high cosmic systems, the lords of infinite cosmic systems, even beings of higher levels. Yet today those at the very highest places in various cosmic systems, who have acted improperly toward Dafa have formed an equal relationship with my different Dafa disciples. Think about what this means. I also tell you, no matter how many Dafa disciples have been persecuted to death as determined by the FA, their lives will exchange places with those highest beings who persecuted them. That is how it is. Why did such high gods come to take part in this event? Why did such high gods affect beings below to persecute Dafa disciples? Even if they didn't directly do it, it was their factors that caused it to be so. Can they not bear responsibility? Since they participated, they must take responsibility for this field of interference. This is the FA principle of the cosmos. Otherwise, it would have nothing to do with them. As long as it has even a trace of connection to them, they must take responsibility for it. If they are not worthy of sitting there, then let Dafa disciples cultivate up to that place and sit there instead. This is the principle. Teaching the FA at the 2003 Midwest US FA Conference. Teaching the FA at various places 3. From Master's words, I understood that Master looks at a disciple's heart. Even though those disciples who intercepted TV signals acted against the FA, their starting point was to save sentient beings. That genuine compassionate heart cannot be denied. So their outcome was still compassionately arranged by Master for consummation. However, for us today, this is a stern warning. We must not act according to ordinary human notions, but must absolutely take the FA as teacher. The lesson right before our eyes is that if in cultivation one departs from the FA and acts according to personal notions, the old forces will exploit that loophole to persecute, inevitably leading to severe consequences. In fact, those disciples who intercepted TV signals reaching consummation is not a compensation for mistakes, but the inevitable achievement when disciples believe in and follow Master's words, clarifying the truth to save sentient beings. This is precisely Master's boundless compassion. Master does not acknowledge the old forces, arrangements in persecuting Dafa disciples. The old forces did not listen to Master's words, and they will have to pay for their acts of undermining Dafa. In reality, not long after the persecution began, Master eradicated the old forces at high levels, leaving only a few within the 3 realms who did not yet know what had happened above. Therefore, we must be even clearer in cultivation. We can only look to Master and the FA, and must never look at the arrangements of the old forces. Master said, currently the old forces have been completely eradicated, from the highest level down to those so-called gods and the degenerate beings arranged by the old forces at different levels to participate in and manipulate FA rectification. They have all been eradicated completely. They no longer exist. And the dark minions carrying out specific tasks are also being eradicated to the very end. FA teaching at the 2003 Washington, D.C. FA conference. Master said, those who have committed monstrous crimes will, during the process of being eliminated, have to compensate for everything they have done. Whatever they did, they must repay accordingly. So this time, with regard to the evil beings that interfered with FA rectification, no matter how evil they have been, they will face the most terrifying consequences never before seen in the cosmos, including the old forces themselves, even if they think they sacrificed for Dafa. In fact, that is just their own notion. From the beginning to the end, they have never truly considered themselves and measured themselves against FA rectification, nor used this FA to measure themselves. Since the future is precisely this FA, the sentient beings of the future are all created from this FA. If they do not use this FA to measure, then what can be used to measure? FA Conference in Atlanta 2003. Listening to Master's teachings in the scriptures, I realized that the universe and sentient beings in the future are all created from Dafa. If this FA is not used to measure, then what else can be used? Therefore, as Dafa disciples, we must use Master's FA to measure everything. All of our actions must be based on the standards of the FA. Only then can we assimilate to Dafa and become divine beings in the new universe. A few words to fellow practitioners reading this article. Some fellow practitioners have asked me, why do you post articles online, instead of directly sending your suggestions to the Minghui editorial team? In fact, our group has sent articles, many times reflecting the problems and mistakes within the overall body of Dafa disciples to Minghui, but we never received a reply. This itself indicates something. Some practitioners also think that our group is showing off, speaking ill of, attacking, or opposing Minghui. However, our group has never opposed Minghui's work in validating Dafa. We only point out the mistakes that damage Dafa by Minghui and the overall body of disciples, so that practitioners will not be led astray, and so that those who have made mistakes can solemnly clarify, apologize to Master, and make up for the losses to Dafa. Isn't this precisely safeguarding Dafa? From Master's teachings, I understood that Minghui is a trustworthy website and a place for Dafa disciples to exchange experiences. After the persecution began, many websites set up by disciples emerged to safeguard Dafa. But at that time, many fake websites created by CCP agents also appeared. Master needed a reliable channel to convey information to disciples worldwide. So he chose Minghui. When Master said Minghui is trustworthy, it was to let disciples know that this site was indeed established by Dafa disciples. This does not mean that everything published on Minghui is necessarily in accordance with the FA, nor that disciples should stop measuring against the FA. Part 10. Why honoring the disciples who intercepted television signals will undermine the righteous faith of all Dafa disciples in Master. The damage to Dafa does not only come from the actions of those disciples who intercepted TV signals, but mainly from the fact that the global body of Dafa disciples blindly honored them as heroes. The reality of more than 24 years has proven that praising this act, which was against the FA, has led to extremely serious consequences. First, the grave consequences for the whole body and for sentient beings. When thousands of disciples worldwide praised this wrongful act for many years, the whole body inadvertently acknowledged the deviation that doing FA rectification work may violate human law and go against the FA. This created a huge loophole for the old forces to exploit, causing many disciples to encounter tribulations, many projects to save people to suffer losses, and even some disciples to lose their lives. As a result, countless sentient beings who should have been saved lost their opportunity to obtain the FA and be saved. Second, it disrupted the standards of cultivation and led to personal worship. If one acknowledges in the heart that wrongdoing can still bring virtue, then it denies the dignity of Dafa. Over time, disciples would no longer take the FA as teacher, but instead take human beings as examples, falling into personal worship and straying from true cultivation. Third, righteous faith in Master and Dafa is eroded. A disciple's faith in Master's protection is the fundamental righteous faith, but Master only protects those who cultivate in accordance with the FA, conducting themselves according to Dafa, honoring disciples who were persecuted to death because they went against the FA is equivalent to denying Master's protection. Their persecution was already a tragedy, but praising such wrongful acts spread the impact further, planting seeds of doubt that Master does not protect disciples. Over time, many disciples formed the deviated notion it is acceptable to violate the law and not fully follow the FA, as long as the purpose is good. Fourth, the danger of destruction from within is more fatal than persecution from outside. Evil persecution cannot shake the will of true Dafa disciples in cultivation. But if wrongdoing is honored as right, then disciples have deviated from the FA in their hearts without realizing it. This is the real fatal danger, corroding the foundation of taking the FA as teacher, causing Dafa to be misunderstood, and leading countless sentient beings to lose their chance of salvation. Those disciples who participated in intercepting signals, when persecuted by the evil, would wonder, I did the right thing. Why am I being persecuted? As a result, they lost righteous faith, even fell into despair and lost their lives. In fact, this meant they followed the arrangements of the old forces, not Master's arrangements. Fifth, straying from the purpose of cultivation and saving people. Cultivation is not for being praised as a hero, but for following Master's teachings, assimilating to Dafa, and saving sentient beings. Even if a disciple dies under persecution while doing the three things, Master still grants consummation. To honor wrongful acts, however, would lead disciples to chase fame and achievements, gradually drifting away from the FA. In summary, honoring the act of intercepting TV signals is not praising virtue, but overturning the foundation of righteous and evil, denying Master's teachings, undermining righteous faith, corroding the FA, assisting the old forces, and harming countless sentient beings. Compared with destruction from outside, this harm is much greater and longer lasting. Master taught, didn't I say before, who can damage the cultivation form of Dafa disciples? Can outside elements damage it through this persecution? They can only temper and mature Dafa disciples and sift the sand away. Who can truly damage this cultivation group? Damage Dafa? No one can, and reality has proven this. I said that is how it is. Interference happens when there are attachments, but the FA cannot be damaged. Only those inside can play a destructive role. Whoever does such things is not a Dafa disciple, so you must not treat them as Dafa disciples, no matter how long they have cultivated. Teachings at the 2014 San Francisco FA Conference. The only thing worthy of honor is the disciples who firmly cultivate according to the FA, maintain righteous faith in Master, and in all circumstances, use righteous thoughts and righteous actions to save sentient beings, without straying from the FA. A sobering lesson. After more than 24 years, we must be all the more clear-headed, take the FA as teacher, and not let human or collective notions cloud our cultivation rationality. Only by maintaining absolute righteous faith in Master and Dafa can the whole body of disciples fully manifest the boundless power of the FA in saving sentient beings. Part 11. Misunderstandings regarding the Scripture. Righteous thoughts should decide what to do. Over the years, some disciples have relied on this Scripture to claim that Master acknowledged the merit of those who intercepted TV signals. This is a misunderstanding. Master taught, at present, Dafa disciples in China are using television to clarify the truth to the people. This is exposing the evil persecution, saving people who have been poisoned by the evil's lies, and is a great act of compassion. The political rogue group of the evil pays no heed whatsoever to the law in persecuting Dafa disciples. We must not, because of fear, deny the actions of Dafa disciples when clarifying the truth, no matter how the evil persecutes. What awaits Dafa disciples is consummation, while what awaits evil beings is only endless repayment in hell for everything they have done to interfere with and persecute the FA rectification and Dafa disciples. Righteous thoughts should decide what to do. Before NTD-TV, New Tang Dynasty Television, was established, there was no mainstream media inside mainland China that could openly speak the truth about the persecution. The founding of NTD-TV was the first breakthrough, shattering the information blockade of the Chinese Communist Party. When this scripture was taught, the background was that Dafa disciples had already established NTD-TV, broadcasting worldwide, including via satellite into China. Because of this, many disciples in China were able to install satellite dishes to watch NTD-TV, programs that clarified the truth without censorship from the CCP's internet security controls. In addition, some other radio and television channels run by Dafa disciples also rented satellite time to broadcast into China, but the most prominent and large-scale was NTD-TV. This was a legitimate undertaking, with legal grounds, not a violation of the law. By contrast, intercepting cable TV signals was an entirely different act, directly disrupting state-run broadcasters' signals, which is an illegal activity. The two differ fundamentally in essence. One is an open and legitimate act acknowledged under international law, renting satellite signals, while the other is an unlawful act of signal disruption, interception. If one claims that Master recognized the merit of TV signal interception, that would be equivalent to saying Master permitted disciples to break the law. This is absolutely impossible. Master never speaks contradictory words. In the great consummation way of Falun Dafa, Master clearly taught, anyone who practices Falun Dafa cultivation must strictly follow the laws of the country. So in other scriptures it is not possible to find content that contradicts this. Therefore, when we use righteous thoughts to evaluate the issue, we see clearly that the scripture righteous thoughts should decide what to do was meant to affirm the merit of lawfully clarifying the truth through satellite television, and absolutely does not endorse the act of TV signal interception. If we confuse the two, not only would it be a misunderstanding of the FA, but it could also easily cause outsiders to wrongly think that Dafa approves of unlawful behavior. There are three reasons why some disciples have misunderstood the scripture. Righteous thoughts should decide what to do. First, being influenced by reports that glorify TV interception as heroic. Second, not understanding the clear distinction between the two forms of broadcasting. Third, judging the matter with sentiment, Qing, instead of based on the FA. Part 12. Why Master could not directly address the TV interception incident. During the course of FA rectification, Master has repeatedly pointed out disciples' mistakes in certain regions or even globally. For example, in the scripture Digging Out the Roots, he spoke about agents pretending to be practitioners in Taiwan, and in on the issue of collecting funds. He addressed unauthorized fundraising in China. Yet, regarding the TV interception incident, Master never spoke directly about it. Why is that? From my understanding, there are three main reasons. First, if spoken about clearly, the old forces would interfere. Master taught that if he spoke directly during cultivation, the old forces would claim that disciples were not truly cultivating on their own but being protected, and they would then intensify the persecution and cause chaos in the overall situation. Master taught, especially during that period of time. I basically didn't say anything, because if I were to say anything, the tests wouldn't count anymore. If they didn't count, two problems would arise. The old forces would go all out to undermine things, claiming this was a cult, and that would create tremendous trouble for my FA rectification and great chaos in the entire universe. That absolutely couldn't happen. Teaching the FA at the Great Lakes Conference in North America. 2000. Guiding the voyage. Second, disciples must enlighten on their own. If Master were to point out exactly what was wrong, then passing the test would no longer count as genuine cultivation. Only when one enlightens and corrects oneself does one's enlightenment quality truly improve. Master taught, each person is to enlighten on his own to his own attachments, and only by passing through will there be true improvement. If others were to point out all of your problems to you, could that still count as your cultivation? Cultivation practice is serious. Third, this was a particularly serious mistake. The TV interception was not only an illegal act, contrary to the FA, but was even praised by many practitioners as a great meritorious deed. This was a collective misunderstanding, taking something contrary to the FA as an achievement. In righteous thoughts should decide what to do. Master only spoke about clarifying the truth through television, that is, via satellite, and never mentioned interception. Yet most disciples took it as an acknowledgement. When understandings are so poisoned, even if Master were to say more, many disciples would still interpret his words through their attachments. This is why the TV interception incident became a major test of disciples. Righteous faith in Master. Conclusion. A genuine disciple does not wait for Master to point out mistakes before correcting them. The unlawful nature of TV interception and the resulting consequences, thousands of practitioners arrested or even killed, are already painfully clear. The real issue is whether we have sufficient righteous faith to admit the mistake and rectify ourselves. Part 13. Publishing statistics of practitioners persecuted based on the FA and safeguarding the FA. Before writing the article about the violations in the television signal tapping, I read many sharing articles on Minghui, written by surviving practitioners who had been involved in those signal tapping incidents back then. The sad reality is that to this day, they still have not clarified the seriousness of the television signal tapping itself, nor the seriousness of honoring the practitioners who carried it out as heroes. I noticed that in some articles honoring the signal tapping practitioners, there is a misleading element that has poisoned many Dafa disciples without them realizing it. When describing the process of how the practitioners who tapped the signal were persecuted to death, these writings often emphasize that they were very steadfast in righteous thoughts and in faith in Master and the FA. This way of writing is driven by sentiment. Master said, but there is one point, no matter what, if you can always maintain righteous thoughts and righteous actions, there is no ordeal you cannot pass. FA teaching at the 2005 San Francisco FA conference. Master said, when you yourselves are able to act righteously, Master can do anything for you. Teaching the FA during the 2001 tour of North America. Righteous thoughts and righteous actions. This means righteous thoughts and righteous actions that accord with the FA taught by Master. Fellow practitioners, think about this rationally. If a disciple is truly very steadfast in righteous thoughts and in faith in Master and the FA, yet was persecuted to death by the evil, isn't that implying that Master did not protect the disciple? In fact, some people who were close to the signal tapping practitioners, out of grief for their deaths, could not see through the attachments in those practitioners' hearts and thus wrote such articles. We need to look at this rationally based on the FA. It was the same for me. I was persecuted by the evil for a year. My body was emaciated and frail, and it was very hard for fellow practitioners outside to understand just how deep the knots in my heart were. We must use the FA to clearly distinguish things, and not judge matters based on sentiment. If one is truly steadfast in righteous thoughts and in faith in Master and the FA, then the evil absolutely cannot persecute them. Master has explained this very clearly. In the FA, it is only because some disciples still have knots and attachments that they haven't let go of in the course of cultivation that loopholes were created for the evil to exploit. Therefore, when writing about practitioners who were persecuted by the evil, we need to approach it from the perspective of based on the FA and safeguarding the FA and not let sentiment cloud our rationality. Only then can we truly help fellow practitioners and ourselves elevate in cultivation, and at the same time, not damage the righteous faith of the whole body of disciples toward Master. Let me give a simple and practical example to make it easier for fellow practitioners to understand. Dafa disciples. Media often collect and publish statistics of practitioners persecuted in China. Suppose the figures report that 20,000 practitioners were imprisoned and died from persecution. This could easily affect the righteous faith of the whole body of disciples toward Master. Because the number is so large, many practitioners might feel shaken, especially those who just entered cultivation. Seeing that so many disciples were persecuted, doubts may arise in their hearts. Didn't Master protect the disciples? From this, fear may emerge and they might not dare to assist Master. The problem is that practitioners only publish the statistics of persecuted disciples without making clear that the fundamental reason is that they had not acted according to the FA taught by Master, and thus the evil exploited the loopholes to persecute them. Since many people in ordinary society also follow those statistics, it may not be necessary to explain this in detail right on the data charts. However, there must be articles or special notices within the Dafa disciple circle, making this point clear to the entire body of practitioners worldwide. Only then is it truly based on the FA and safeguarding the FA. Thus, when publishing persecution statistics, we must simultaneously explain the issue on the basis of the FA, so that the whole body of disciples understands that everything has its cause, and that only when disciples do things wrong can the old forces persecute them. Only by understanding issues from the perspective of the FA can the righteous faith of the whole body of disciples in Master remain firm and unshakable. In this way, instead of giving rise to doubts or wavering, such information will become a force that helps Dafa disciples strive forward diligently and walk the path of cultivation righteously. In reality, Master has made it very clear. If disciples truly maintain righteous thoughts and righteous actions, then the evil absolutely cannot persecute them. Therefore, when publishing persecution statistics, it is all the more necessary to explain the causes clearly so that fellow practitioners understand that as long as one acts according to the FA, Master will protect them. In this way, their righteous faith will be strengthened instead of giving rise to doubt.